He had everything: money, power, the world at his feet. But the one thing he couldn't keep was her. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a story of love, betrayal, and heartbreak. The kind of story that leaves scars, not happy endings. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers dripping light like diamonds. Billionaires and heirs filled the room, their laughter echoing through walls lined with gold. And in the middle of it all stood Isabella Martinez, an ordinary girl, dressed in black, serving champagne to a world that never noticed her, until one mistake brought her face to face with the man whose life was built on billions. She stood at the edge of the grand charity gala, her black dress simple compared to the gowns stitched with silver and gold. She wasn't meant to be there. She was only a last-minute assistant for the event, serving champagne to billionaires who didn't even notice the weight of money they carried so carelessly. Yet fate had its cruel sense of humor. That was the night she saw him. Alexander Knight. His name alone carried power, heir to the Knight Empire, a man whose net worth could silence entire nations. The tabloids called him ruthless, untouchable, the crownless king of Wall Street. But Isabella saw something different when their eyes met. His gaze wasn't just cold, it was tired, as though wealth had become a cage instead of freedom. He was arguing with someone near the marble staircase, his jaw tight, glass in hand. The press was everywhere, their cameras circling like vultures, waiting for a single slip. Isabella had been moving through the crowd with a tray of glasses when she saw it happen. Alexander stumbling slightly, his champagne slipping, almost spilling onto the pristine white gown of a senator's wife. A scandal in the making. Without thinking, Isabella slid in. With a steady hand, she caught the glass before it tipped, offering a soft smile as though nothing had happened. The cameras didn't catch the almost accident. All they saw was a nameless woman serving champagne. But Alexander noticed. For the first time that evening, his lips curved into the ghost of a smile. "Quick hands," he said quietly, low enough for only her to hear. Isabella's heart stuttered. She forced her voice steady. "Wouldn't want the kin of Wall Street making tomorrow's headlines over spilled champagne." His eyebrow lifted at her boldness. Few dared to speak to him like that. Even fewer did it without trembling. For reasons she couldn't understand, he didn't walk away. He followed her with his eyes as she returned to her post, curiosity glinting where arrogance usually lived. Later that night, as Isabella helped collect empty glasses, she felt a presence behind her. "What's your name?" His voice was velvet, smooth yet commanding. She turned, startled to see him so close. "Isabella," she replied, unsure if she should bow her head or meet his gaze. She chose the latter. "Isabella," he repeated, tasting her name like fine wine. "You don't belong here." The word stung. She swallowed, lifting her chin. "Neither do you." For a second, silence hung between them, thick with unspoken truths. Then he laughed, a soft, disbelieving laugh that broke through the polished mask he wore. It wasn't the laugh of a billionaire who had everything. It was the laugh of a man who, despite it all, felt utterly alone. Their worlds should never have collided. She was the daughter of a seamstress, working part-time jobs to keep her younger brother in school. He was Alexander Knight, the man who owned skyscrapers, yachts, and the loyalty of politicians. But fate isn't always kind. Sometimes it intertwines lives only to tear them apart later, leaving scars deeper than love itself. That night,
Isabella left the gala with more than tired feet. She left with his gaze imprinted in her soul, burning like a secret she couldn't name. Days passed, and she tried to shake it off. Men like Alexander lived in another universe, one where women like her were invisible. But then the flowers came. A dozen white roses delivered to her tiny apartment, wrapped in silk instead of paper. No card, only a note. For the girl who saved me from myself. Her heart raced. She knew who they were from. When his number appeared on her phone the next evening, she didn't ask how he'd gotten it. She answered with trembling hands. His voice was calm, measured, yet laced with something softer when he spoke to her. He asked her to meet him for coffee, not in some gilded tower, but in a quiet cafe on the edge of the city where no cameras waited. Isabella should have said no. Every instinct warned her that nothing good could come from walking into a billionaire's life. But loneliness has a way of silencing reason. She went. And when she saw him sitting there, dressed simply, no entourage, no headlines, just Alexander, her heart betrayed her. He wasn't the ruthless tycoon the world painted him to be. He was a man searching for something money couldn't buy. But fate, cruel and unrelenting, doesn't gift such moments without demanding a price. As the evening drew on, Isabella felt the shift, a dangerous thread pulling them closer. In his eyes, she saw a storm brewing. In her heart, she felt the ground tremble. It was only the beginning, but she already knew nothing about this would end well. And she was right.
The cafe became their sanctuary. No paparazzi, no bodyguards, no suffocating air of billion-dollar deals. Just two people sitting across from each other, nursing cups of coffee that had long gone cold. Isabella never understood why Alexander kept asking her back, night after night. But she went anyway. Maybe curiosity, maybe longing, maybe because the sound of his laughter, when it broke through that icy exterior, felt like warmth in a world that had always been cold to her. He listened when she spoke, not in the distracted way wealthy men sometimes entertain those beneath them, but with a sharp, undivided focus that both unnerved and thrilled her. He asked about her family, her dreams, the brother she was raising after their father's death. He wanted to know her, not the girl in the black dress serving champagne. And when he spoke of himself, it was different from the headlines. The papers wrote about Alexander Knight, the ruthless deal-maker. The cafe revealed a man trapped in a life built for him before he was old enough to choose. He confessed how every relationship he had was calculated, every friendship strategic, every smile rehearsed. "Sometimes I wonder," he said one night, staring out the rain-speckled window, "if anyone has ever loved me for me. Not the name, not the money, just me." His voice cracked, almost imperceptibly. Isabella's chest tightened. She wanted to tell him she saw him, that lonely boy behind the billions. But instead she whispered, "Maybe you've just been looking in the wrong places." It was reckless, dangerous, and the way his eyes flicked to hers, dark with something unspoken, told her he felt it too. It wasn't long before their stolen hours spilled into stolen days, a walk in the park where no one recognized him, a late-night drive in his car, the city lights flashing like dying stars, a night on the rooftop of her tiny apartment where he lay on a blanket beside her, staring up at the same sky he had from penthouse suites. "I've stood on rooftops 100 times," he admitted, his arm brushing hers, "but it's different here. It feels real." And Isabella, foolish and fragile, began to believe she could be his escape. But reality has sharp edges, and it doesn't let lovers from different worlds dream for long. The first crack appeared when she saw her reflection beside him in the mirrored walls of a luxury hotel lobby. He had insisted on bringing her to a business dinner, saying he wanted her there, saying she made him feel alive. Isabella had dressed in the best gown she could afford, simple silk, pale blue, But standing beside Alexander in his tailored suit worth more than her year's salary, she felt exposed. The whispers started before they even reached the table. The women glanced at her dress, their lips curling into hidden smirks. The men looked her over like she was a passing curiosity, not worth remembering. And then she arrived. Charlotte Davenport, heiress, socialite. The woman the tabloids whispered was destined to be Mrs. Knight. She glided into the room like she owned the floor, every step a reminder of the world Isabella didn't belong to. Charlotte kissed Alexander on the cheek as if Isabella wasn't even there. "Still playing with toys, darling?" Her smile was sweet poison, her eyes cutting straight through Isabella. Alexander's jaw clenched. Charlotte. But Isabella had already excused herself. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't bear the pity and the stares around her. Outside, the city felt colder than it ever had. When Alexander found her, his face was shadowed with guilt. "Don't listen to her. She's nothing. It's complicated." "Complicated," Isabella repeated, her voice breaking. "Alexander, she looked at me like I was nothing. And maybe she's right. I don't belong in your world." He grabbed her hand, desperate. "Then stay in mine. Not the world they see, not the empire, just here, with me." And God help her, she believed him. For weeks after, she clung to that fragile promise. She let herself fall, harder than she should have. She memorized the sound of his voice when he said her name. She found pieces of herself in his broken confessions. She built quiet dreams of a future that might never exist. But behind his tenderness, the storm grew louder. Business meetings ran later. His father's name appeared more often in his calls, sharp and demanding. And always in the corners of his life, Charlotte lingered. Isabella told herself love was enough, that if she gave more of herself, if she held on tighter, he would fight for her. That the man who once asked if anyone could love him for him would see she already did. But love, no matter how pure, can't silence an empire. The night he canceled their rooftop plans, whispering instead that he had a family dinner with expectations, Isabella felt it in her bones. The fairy tale she had dared to believe in was starting to unravel.
For a time, it almost felt like love could win. Isabella found herself waking up to text messages that made her blush like a teenager. "Thinking of you. I miss the rooftop." Or, "Tonight, just us." Alexander carved out stolen hours for her, carving pieces of himself from a schedule built on empires and expectations. He would show up at her apartment without warning, wearing a suit that still smelled of boardrooms, only to fall asleep on her couch, as though it was the only place he felt safe. They had no mansion, no penthouse when they were together, only dimly lit cafes, midnight walks, and the fragile bubble of a love that belonged to no one but them. And in those fleeting moments, Isabella let herself dream. She imagined introducing him to her brother, Miguel, who idolized the idea of success but never saw the loneliness it carried. She imagined dinners that weren't secret, smiles that weren't stolen, a life where she wasn't constantly reminded that she was the girl from nowhere, daring to hold the hand of a billionaire. And then came the night on the rooftop when Alexander made a promise that sealed her fate. "I'll choose you, Isabella," he whispered, his forehead resting against hers as the city burned in lights below. "I don't care about the board or my father or Charlotte. I don't want any of it if it means losing you." Tears welled in her eyes. No one had ever chosen her before. Not her absent father, not the men who came and went like seasons. And now, here was Alexander Knight, the man who could command boardrooms and nations with a glance, swearing that what he wanted was her. She believed him. God, she believed him with her whole heart. For a few blissful weeks they lived inside that promise. Alexander was reckless with his affection, kissing her in places where the city might see, holding her hand even when whispers followed. He didn't care, or at least he pretended not to. And Isabella gave everything. She risked her reputation, her job, even the stability of her family, because her heart told her that love was worth it. She silenced the doubts that clawed at her every time Charlotte's name appeared in the society pages, every time Alexander's father was quoted in the news about securing the future of the Knight legacy. But love, no matter how fierce, cannot stand against the weight of an empire. The betrayal came quietly. It was a Thursday evening, rain slicking the streets, when Isabella waited on their rooftop with 2 mugs of coffee growing cold in her hands. Alexander was late. He was always late, but this time felt different. When he finally arrived, his suit was immaculate, but his eyes carried something broken. She knew before he spoke. "My father," he began, his voice hoarse. "He's threatened everything. The company, my position. Isabella, I tried. I swear I tried." Her hands trembled. Tried what? To fight them, to fight this. He looked at her as though memorizing her face. "They've arranged it. The merger with Davenport Industries. Charlotte, the wedding." The words sliced through her like glass. She set the mugs down on the concrete because she was afraid her shaking would shatter them. "You promised me." "I know," his voice cracked. For once, Alexander Knight, the man who commanded boardrooms and nations with a glance, looked powerless. "I meant it when I said it, every word. But they'll destroy everything if I don't—" Her laugh was bitter, sharp. "Everything? You mean money, power, your empire. That's what matters, isn't it?" "No." He grabbed her hands, desperate. "You matter. You've always mattered. But I can't—" She pulled away, her chest aching like it might cave in. "You can't what? Choose me over billions? Over a name that never even made you happy?" Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of him. "You made me believe, Alexander. You made me believe I was worth fighting for." "You are," he whispered, but the words felt hollow, already defeated. The rooftop that once held their laughter now echoed with silence and rain. Isabella turned from him, staring at the city that had never belonged to her. She realized then that she had been living in a dream stitched from borrowed time. Love might have been real, but in his world, love wasn't enough. She left him standing there that night, his suit damp with rain, his empire intact, but his heart unraveling.
Weeks passed, but time didn't soften the wound. If anything, it deepened. Isabella tried to bury herself in work, in caring for her brother, and pretending the world hadn't slipped out from under her feet. But every night, when the city grew quiet, she could still feel him. The warmth of his hand, the way he whispered her name, the promise he broke. Alexander Knight was everywhere, on television screens, magazine covers, stock tickers flashing across cafe windows. And then came the headline that hollowed her out completely. Alexander Knight and Charlotte Davenport to wed in December, the empire secured. The glossy photo of them, smiling, perfect, and untouchable, cut deeper than any blade. Charlotte's hand rested on his arm like she had always belonged there. And Alexander, he was smiling. Not the fragile, broken smile Isabella had known. A rehearsed one. The mask. The lie. Isabella shut the magazine and walked away before the tears blurred her vision. But fate is cruel. It wasn't finished with her. One evening, as she walked home from her shift, a black car slowed beside her. The tinted window rolled down, and there he was, Alexander. He looked nothing like the man in the magazines. His hair was disheveled, his eyes ringed with sleeplessness. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city hummed around them, but silence roared louder. "Get in," he said softly. Against her better judgment, she did. They drove in silence until the car stopped at the edge of the river, the city lights rippling on the water.
He dismissed his driver and stood there with her, the night wind pulling at his coat. "I had to see you," he said finally. His voice broke like glass under pressure. "I can't breathe without you, Isabella." She laughed bitterly, hugging her arms around herself. "You seemed to be breathing just fine in the papers." His face twisted with pain. "That wasn't me. None of it is me. The dinners, the smiles, the wedding, it's all for them, for the empire, for the legacy I never wanted." "Then walk away," she whispered fiercely, tears spilling before she could stop them. "If you love me, Alexander, just walk away. Money, power, it's killing you. Leave it. Leave her. Leave all of it. Come with me." The silence that followed was her answer. His jaw clenched, his fists shook at his sides. He wanted to. God, he wanted to. But the invisible chains of his world were stronger than his will. "I can't," he said finally, his voice a broken confession. Her chest caved in. She staggered back as if the words themselves had struck her. "Then don't tell me you love me." He stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. "I do. I'll always love you. But I can't give you the life you deserve. I can't give you a future without destroying everything." "Then you've already destroyed me," she whispered. The words lingered in the night air, heavy and final. They stood by the river, two souls tethered by love, yet torn apart by destiny. His hand reached for hers, but she stepped back. "Goodbye, Alexander." Her voice cracked, but her steps didn't falter as she turned and walked away, her tears falling faster than the rain beginning to drizzle. He didn't chase her. He couldn't. And she didn't look back, because she knew if she did, she'd never be able to let go. Years later, Alexander Knight was still the empire's king. The tabloids called his marriage to Charlotte a success, a merger that fortified dynasties. He had more wealth than any man could dream, skyscrapers etched with his name, and power that reached across oceans. But at night, in the silence of penthouses and the echo of ballrooms, he thought of her, Isabella, the girl with quick hands and a fierce heart, who once made him believe he could be more than the chains he wore. And every time her memory returned, it tore him open again. Because Alexander had everything, except the one thing that had ever made him feel alive. And Isabella? She never saw him again. But sometimes, when the city lights flickered against her window, she could still feel him in the shadows. Not as a lover, not as the man who broke her, but as the ghost of what might have been. Some loves don't end with closure. Some end with silence, with the weight of unspoken words, with the memory of promises too fragile to survive. Their story was one of them. And so the billionaire lived with his empire.
If you like this story, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more interesting stories. Thank you.